Hello, and thanks for joining us on KHOU 11+. I'm Sherman Chow. Right now, we want to take some time to celebrate some of Houston's most remarkable women. Let's start with one of the biggest events in women's history, the day women were allowed to vote. Rekha Mudaraj revisits Harris County's key moments for our story, our history.
In the heart of Houston sits a home built in 1850. Key to the local women's suffrage movement.
I feel the energy in the house.
And if these walls talk, Ray Bryant is listening. As part of the Houston Suffragist Project, she and a handful of genealogists recently uncovered some unexpected Houston history.
In 1886, John Finnegan purchased this house, and two of his daughters started the suffrage movement in Texas in 1902.
It was here, meeting with high society women, daughters and wives of former Confederate soldiers, that sisters Annette and Elizabeth Bessie Finnegan had conversations about what it would mean to be able to vote. Meanwhile, black women in Harris County, many of them teachers, also began to organize.
Their churches, their social groups.
Teaching women how to vote. So when the 19th Amendment was ratified in August of 1920, communities were ready. But as Bryant points out, it didn't mean a smooth journey to the polls. A major hurdle, the state's poll tax. For minorities or impoverished women, this would keep them from voting.
Our secret weapon, Hortense Ward, she cooked it up that 9 days before the election on November 2nd, the women went to court challenging the Texas Constitution.
Ward, the first woman to pass the Texas State Bar, successfully argued that women should vote for free because the 19th Amendment could not deny or abridge women the right to vote. And she won. Still, many county officials secretly asked poll workers to turn women away who didn't have a poll tax receipt. But prominent women in the community rallied again, going before a judge the day before the election, winning a second hearing. On Election Day, thousands of women lined up to vote in Harris County. Black women voted at the DeGeorge grocery store, then located at Milam and Clay.
They stood in line and their men surrounded them as they stood for hours because they were afraid of being attacked. This is a chance even a woman who was born in bondage could vote for free.
In all, 14,000 women voted. Around 6,000 of them were black women. Bryant says if you're a Texan, a Houstonian, a woman, or all of the above, remember this.
You are walking on the path that women have been walking on for 175 years.
During the United States Civil Rights Movement, one African-American woman would be the ultimate pioneer for Houston educators. Mia Gradney shows us the story of Hattie Mae White, the first black woman to become a member of Houston's school board.
Houston's population in 1900, 45,000. Today, 1,400,000.
1964 Houston was just coming into its own. A progressive metropolitan city with aerospace, arts, and architecture raising its profile and its skyline.
It's now the tallest building west of the Mississippi.
A desirable place to live, work, and play for both whites and blacks. Still, this was the 60s, and for all Houston had going for it, it seriously lacked an equal education.
How are the schools here?
Well, I might be stepping on someone's toes, but the schools are still backwards.
Houston was incredibly slow to integrate schools, despite Brown versus the Board of Education, the 1954 Supreme Court case which found racial segregation of children in public schools unconstitutional. 10 years later, in Houston, not much had happened. Acutely aware of it and advocating for change was Hattie Mae White, a teacher who became the first African-American elected to the HISD school board in 1958.
So you have a total of how many Negro children going to school with whites?
About 250 in 10 previously all-white schools.
That's out of a total school population of what?
Of 211,000.
Well, that wouldn't seem to indicate that integration has progressed very rapidly in the schools.
This is perhaps the greatest sore spot in the city of Houston.
Mrs. White spoke frankly, despite the racist backlash. She remained steadfast on the school board during this difficult time, met with constant resistance. There were multiple lawsuits and legal interventions to move integration along.
The Houston School Board seems to put forth every effort they can to keep the status quo.
By 1968, the Department of Justice declared the district's desegregation efforts were lagging and unjust. New efforts were made, new schools, new plans, and more involvement from the federal government.
This is not the first time we have had differences of opinion with the Justice Department. I doubt if it will be the last.
It took HISD decades to fully desegregate its schools. Hattie Mae White spent 3 terms on the HISD school board before losing a re-election and returning to teaching. Today, her legacy lives on despite her passing in 1993. Here in central northwest Houston is HISD headquarters, also known as the Hattie Mae White Educational Support Center, named to honor the longtime advocate who strived for a truly equal education for everyone.
When it comes to our local trailblazers, Space City boasts a NASA engineer who reached for the moon. Here is Janelle Bluda with Poppy Northcutt's story.
At just 22 years old, Poppy Northcutt had no idea what life had in store.
We were basically taught that, the whole goal of going to college was to get married.
But today, she's a trailblazer, a women's rights activist, and the first female engineer to work with NASA.
I got that job right out of college. I had a math degree.
Starting out as a computress,
I thought it was a little weird that I was called a female computer.
Northcutt broke through the glass ceiling and climbed her way to engineer, the first female engineer.
And it just occurred to me, I'm as smart as these guys, okay?
And just years later, her expertise in helping astronauts come home from the moon landed her the title of the first woman inside a NASA control room. Working on the Apollo 8 mission, she was even there for the lunar landing.
It's one small step for man.
So I worked over in the control center on 8, 10, 11, 12, and 13.
But even after 5 Apollo missions, Poppy found a new passion.
My attitude was, I'm here. I'm a woman, get used to it.
Even though they shared the same title, Northcutt knew her male co-workers were making more money.
So I became very interested in women's rights, okay? Having experienced this discrimination.
And she saw women in her field were still few and far between.
It wasn't so much that they were being turned down, they just never knew they had the option of trying to get in line. I mean, that's the ideal way to oppress people, is to keep them from ever showing up in the first place.
Poppy went off to become an attorney, advocate, and activist, marching in the 1970 Women's Strike for Equality.
And getting the passage of the Texas Equal Legal Rights Amendment to our state constitution.
She's done so much, but still.
We still have a ways to go.
The fight isn't finished.
You just have to keep going, and the main thing I would say is you've got to be politically involved. I mean, if you don't want this to happen to you, you've got to take action. You can't just sit around and be passive about it.
One woman from the Bayou Bend, known for her philanthropy, mental health advocacy, and art collection, Reiko Mudaraj shares I'm a Hog's legacy.
On the other side of this footbridge over Buffalo Bayou, in the heart of River Oaks, is a sprawling estate built by a remarkable woman.
We are standing in Bayou Bend, which was built in the late 1920s.
Ima Hogg was the sole resident of this 2-story, 24-room home for more than 3 decades.
Miss Hogg was born in Mineola, Texas in 1882.
Hogg's father, James, was the first native-born Texan to become the state's governor. Years after his term ended, the family moved to Houston in 1905. But Ima and her brothers didn't acquire their significant wealth until more than a decade after their father's death in 1906, when they discovered oil on family-owned land in West Columbia.
With that wealth, she used that money to fund her philanthropic endeavors.
Hogg was considered a pioneer, establishing the Hogg Foundation for Mental Health in 1940 at UT Austin.
It was extremely progressive. I think she suffered with depression and mental health issues herself, and then felt that was really important to bring to children and families.
As a classical pianist who trained in New York and Europe, she organized the Houston Symphony Orchestra in 1913. She was even elected to the Houston School Board in 1943, and during her term worked to remove gender and race as criteria for determining pay. But what she collected within these walls may be her most visible contribution.
And she started rapidly building a collection in the 1950s of American decorative arts and paintings that would tell the history of our nation.
Behind the ropes, an up-close look at significant paintings.
This portrait is by Charles Willson Peale. He is one of the most important colonial American artists.
Rare artifacts and furniture.
It's called a turret top table. It's quite rare. There's probably just a handful of them surviving.
And even commemorative dinnerware,
which was made in Staffordshire, England. It had images of the Mexican-American War.
There are still items in the home Hogg enjoyed in her everyday life.
Behind this cabinet, Miss Hogg had this Scott radio. It comes with stereo system, a turntable, and this remote control.
The rooms themselves entertaining legendary visitors.
Andy Warhol visited. He loved this bathroom.
The dining room hosted world leaders for a dinner in 1990 during the G7 summit. While most of her extensive art collection is housed at the Museum of Fine Arts Houston, many culturally significant pieces are still here. And since Hogg never married or had children, the woman known as the First Lady of Texas gifted all of this to Houstonians to enjoy for decades to come.
Despite being legally blind, the head chef at the Blind Goat never gave up. I had the pleasure to speak with Christine Ha on how she navigates a kitchen and her dreams.
From the start, she captivated us.
That was in 2012 when friends urged Christine Ha, then a U of H grad student, to audition for MasterChef.
You should go on national television and show America how a blind person cooks.
Christine!
She did, and she won, launching the unlikely chef into celebrity status. Christine, the daughter of Vietnamese refugees, lost her eyesight to a neurological disease in her 20s.
So I see some color contrast, some light, but everything is pretty washed out and very blurry. I really feel like if you lost a sense, you make up for it in some other way.
Her fingers and tongue do double duty in the kitchen.
Do you really cook at home still?
I do. This is my spice drawer, so all the spices are organized actually in alphabetical order.
There, she uses adaptive technologies.
So I know this is Central Market ground cayenne. A lot of my research and development also happens at home where I'm most comfortable.
Today, she has 2 restaurants in the same shopping center in Spring Branch, the well-known Blind Goat and the newly opened Stuffed Belly, a drive-thru which does a riff on classic American sandwiches. Christine has a New York Times best-selling cookbook and has starred on other cooking shows. Her advice for taking that long shot?
The chance is 0 unless you try, and you just never know, because I am the perfect example and testament to how you can follow something and the least expected path and doors can be open to you if you try taking that risk.
All this from a woman who still considers herself risk-adverse.
I want my former little girl self to be able to see, like, hey, this person looks like me in the restaurant, on television, in movies, writing books. I think that's very important.
Wow, you would have a lot to tell your 10-year-old self because you have basically done all of that.
Who knows what's next?
The WNBA has reached new heights in popularity recently, and while the old Comets are legendary with 3 WNBA titles, there is an earlier chapter of women's pro basketball. Our Jason Bristol shows us the opening play of women dominating the court.
Every day was like a surprise.
At a senior living facility in Houston, we found 2 angels.
Just very thankful.
One visiting the other.
Our players said,
reminiscing about old times.
Going up and down.
Their stories and stuff.
This is our warm-up.
Proof they definitely earned their wings. This video from 1979 and the KHOU-11 archives features a team called the Houston Angels, which later won the first championship in the history of women's professional basketball. The secret to the team's success? We'll get to that. Back then, head coach Don Nodal initially didn't know what to think.
I've never coached women before.
When he received a call from a man claiming he'd bought a team in a new league.
I was looking for a coach, and I was told you would be a good one to have. And I thought, wow, I'm stunned.
Don found an assistant coach, and the two set out to build a squad from scratch through an open tryout.
So my mother and I hopped in the car. She made a shirt with my name on the back of it.
There, they discovered Karen Allenbacher, who ended up wearing number 11, a star at Baylor. She was then coaching 7th graders.
Travis Junior High brought this Houston Chronicle article and said, "Coach, you need to do this."
What followed was a whirlwind inaugural season for the Women's Professional Basketball League and the Angels, who played in front of sparse crowds.
I don't know how many we had. We might have had
at Astro Arena.
1,000 people. How they got there, I don't know.
Nodal had to get creative to keep the financially strapped team afloat, at times scraping together just enough players to make road trips.
How did you overcome all that?
I don't know.
A bogus investor even offered to buy the franchise for $1 million. It was a sham.
You can kind of see the energy of the 70s in the WBL, where it's sort of shotgun in a lot of ways.
Kate Fagan is a former pro player and the author of the book Hoop Muses, an insider guide to pop culture and the women's game.
The stories that come out of the WBL are fascinating, as well as just a short glimpse into the financial picture of so many of these women's leagues. Like, there's just this idea, like, let's do this thing and let's get just enough money to start it, and not the long-term vision of what's truly needed, the losses needed to sustain a league.
Salaries ranged from only $3,600 to $15,000 for star players.
We had food stamps.
And Houston's coaches, Karen points out, ended up getting nothing.
Not one penny were these men paid.
Luckily, they had their day jobs. To their opponents, the Angels' style of play was more hell than heaven. Their physical defense earning the team the nickname Houston Muggers. That first season, they won 26 of their 34 games. And in the postseason, later beat a team from Iowa in the league championship series.
What's the reaction? Is there a parade? Do you get championship rings?
We got rings.
Oh, you got rings.
The final game in Houston was played in front of nearly 6,000 people, the largest crowd to watch either team all season.
We've got 4 players that are starting that we got in our tryout camp. And
the secret to the Houston Angels' success? Nodal had no blueprint, so Don, now 93, quickly relied on his previous experience as Rice University's men's coach. The solution was simple.
I think we've got to figure it out. We need to quit coaching them as women. We're going to start coaching them as basketball players. And from that day on, they got better, got better.
And many of us weren't coached really hard in college. It was in the 70s, right? We adjusted. That's what people do, right?
Coach, you do bed check on the road trips? Just on my assistant.
These two remain in touch all these decades later. Thrilled to watch the game video we brought along.
God, I didn't realize I had so much hair.
And eager to share their stories.
My team is the star.
That hadn't changed.
After all, the good deeds of these Angels shouldn't fade into oblivion.
This gave many girls the opportunity to fulfill a dream.
They would have played for nothing. They were so eager to win and to be a professional.
It was one of the best experiences I've ever had in my life.
Artists, athletes, engineers, and trailblazers. The city of Houston has been home to some remarkable women. Thanks for watching this on KHOU 11+.